Yes, so you say transnational capital will move to the Levant. Does this mean that America is a good candidate to eventually have a renaissance of some sort, whether spiritual or intellectual? And since you say Americans are the most energetic and entrepreneurial people in the world, also, what is the best way to be a part of this potential renaissance as a regular civilian with no political power?
That is a great question, okay? And something that I've been struggling with for a long, long time. What's going to happen to America once all this capital shifts to Pax Judaica? And there are two possibilities, okay? The first is, the most optimistic is you have this renaissance where um, the Americans return to the revolution, 1776, the spirit of 1776, and they rebuild a society that is a republic. That's one possibility. Another possibility is America just cascades into civil war and destruction for the next 20 years. Okay, so um, both are true. The latter is probably much more probable and has to do with a particular characteristic of how humans behave. All right, so let me tell you about a experiment, okay, conducted by psychologists. And so what psychologists did, and they've been doing this for a long time, is they divide people into two groups. In the first group, they ask you to play a game for free. Okay, you just play the game for free. You just play it because you're interested in it. And the second group, you pay the group to play the game, and you give them bonus for playing the game really well. Okay, and they've done this experiment for like decades. Okay, and the results are always the same. And every instance of this experiment, the first group that does things for free, yeah, at first you're not that interested, but but some stick with the game, and the more they play, the more interested they come in the game, and they keep on playing the game for a long, long time, and they become much more motivated. Okay, that's the first group. The second group, it's pretty stark what happens, where in the beginning everyone is focused on getting the best score possible, and they work really, really hard. But the moment you take away the incentive, they lose all interest in the game and they don't show up anymore. Okay. So we translate this into geopolitics. What is most likely to happen is all of America right now is a society dedicated towards making as much money as possible. That's all it is. That's a glue that keeps everyone together. And because of this, people are exhausted. And the only way to get people to maintain motivation is by paying them more money. Okay. So the example is maybe when I was growing up, in the 1980s, we thought $80,000 was a lot of money. If you became an engineer who made $80,000, that was a lot of money. Nowadays, young people think that $600,000 is a lot of money. $600,000. There are not that many people in the world who make $600,000. Right? So you have an absurd situation where if I pay you $100,000 to be a factory worker, most American guys are like, I don't want to do that, man, because that's not a lot of money. And like, how am I gonna able to afford a house? How am I gonna raise a family on $100,000 a year? So what do? Well, they listen to Andrew Tate and gamble on cryptocurrency and try to scam um, money. And the really smart kids, what do? They do AI because AI in their mind is not the future, but it's the quickest way to scam money in the short term. Okay? So transnational capital understands this. It understands that, you know what? America's been a good ride. We were here for 100 years and we made a lot of money, but you know what? This place is going to burn down. So let's just move and go to Israel. If Israel doesn't work out, let's go to Argentina. Okay, so I'm not really sure what's going to happen, but the evidence suggests that America will probably descend into civil war. Okay, all right. Do you want to ask a follow-up question, Samuel, or comment?
I guess my follow-up question really quick would be, which communities do you see in America most or better equipped to prosper in the long term? What are the main qualities that they need to, I guess, have or focus on in order to prosper long term in America?
Great question. So, I would bet all my money on Texas. Okay. Texas is very religious. It's very independent. People there are very hardworking. Texas is probably the future of the United States because, like, a civil war doesn't mean the United States goes away. It just means that certain regions prosper, certain regions suffer. Okay. So, if you are in California, New York City, Boston, you're basically in Sodom and Gomorrah right now, okay? These places are dead. They are finished. They're just, I mean, there's no future to these places. The South, I would say Texas is has the best future, but I would say any place in the South, any place where people have like good family values, and they're very religious and they're very family orientated, and they're very hardworking. They'll prosper in the future. Okay, so Christian nationalism is really the future of the United States. If there's a place which embraces Christian nationalism, then it's probably going to prosper. If a place embraces multiculturalism, liberal values, it's dead in the water. It won't survive. Okay. All right. Yeah, Samuel.
Yes, thank you, Professor.
Okay. H.
Hey,
H.
Jiang. Hey, hello, Jiang. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, thanks for watching again. Always happy to wake up to one of your emergency lectures. I'm from Melbourne, Australia again. So yeah, this ties back to the transnational capital question. I was really wondering this as well, and I think many of us are wondering, because you speak about transnational capital as it was like a unified, unstoppable, or even like an omniscient force. But is that really true? Like, is there infighting, in terms of transnational capital? And also, I watched your lecture on the Protestant Reformation and the birth of spirit of capitalism. I have some concerns though, and obviously, as they say, right, the best student always questions his teacher. The disciple questions his master, right? So I want to challenge you as well on this because there's evidence to show that, like, profit seeking and like making money or kind of like these sort of activities, it predates Protestant Reformation. Obviously, of course, the Dutch took it, basically, endowed it up to like 100 or 1000. But like Catholic Church was making a lot of money as well. The Franciscan like ideologies, Peter of John Oliver. These people were like, kind of like very profit driven as well. And they say, okay, well, and what's kind of weird is like, okay, well, you say the printing press, right? Like Gutenberg and all that, it increased literacy and got people to like to actually read the Bible. Well, doesn't the Bible say that like Jesus says that it's harder for a rich person to enter heaven than it is a whatever, like camel to go through like a string. I forgot what the exact quote, but something like that, like camel to go through a string knot or something like that. Basically, like, so like impossible for a rich person or a businessman to go to heaven. So if that's the case, then like, why are you pursuing money then, right? Because so isn't John Calvin like sort of like going against Christ then? Because Jesus says like, well, if you're rich, you ain't getting to heaven. But then John Calvin's like, okay, well, no, you have to get rich in order to be considered capable to get rich. So there's a lot of conflicts happening here. And also, what's interesting is like, because you've been in Japan and you talk about the Meiji Restoration. Well, Japan didn't really have any Protestant Reformation, and they are sort of like, well, they are indeed the only nation or sort of a because nation state didn't exist before, but like a community or culture that has, sort of really went full on in capitalism, the Meiji Restoration, and how they took on like central banking and all that. Even before the Meiji Restoration, before imperial capitalism, before the Japanese became imperial. Have you heard of like the Dojima? I was like Dojima Rice Exchange. This is a very niche kind of thing because I study Japanese, like Japan, a lot.
Mm,
They were like the first futures market in the world, and this is like the before the Dutch. So this is like the maybe 16th century, something like that. And
yeah.
obviously back then it was like rice stipends, so it wasn't like obviously market capitalism or consumerism. It was nowhere near that. But they were the sort of merchants like near Osaka were like really gambling on rice. So it's also like humans have a habit of, like just taking anything basically and taking whatever at that period of time allows them to also like gamble on, money making and profit seeking. And also, the shogunate, the Tokugawa, once they said about they didn't really like that, so they kind of like cracked down on it because they want to, like the confusion is like, okay, well, merchants are at the bottom, right? The ladder is scholars slash in Japan is like the samurai warriors. Then you have a craftsman, then you have peasants and serfdom. Then you have merchants, but merchants are like parasitic force. So this existed before Protestantism, and Japan took on capitalism very well. I mean, Mitsubishi, Mitsui, they basically just monopolized the entire East Asian shipping, and in about 30 years, like after the Meiji Restoration. So, like, how do you explain this? And yeah, so like there's a few questions about First question is like just to restate, um, do you really think transnational capital is a unified force? And also, actually, my real question is this, okay? So most people in the world, I think maybe you and me, like basically everyone is cool included, like we sort of earn money because we have to, right? Like I need to put bread on the table. I need to buy coffee in the morning to stay awake. I need to buy shoes to walk. I need to buy a house to, have a roof on my head. What is transnational capital's goal? Because these motherfuckers have so much money. These cunts have like so much money. What are you gonna buy the world? You gonna buy like the universe? Like, what is their goal? Because like Jared Kushner, like Epstein, whatever, like whatever you want to call these Zionist capitalists, they're like you can get anything you want. You can buy like 15 Porsches, you can buy 2,000 Mercedes. Like, what is the point of money making like at that point? And there's a really just this like almost hypnotized state where they just cannot stop, like until as Emil Durkheim, in a lecture says, until it reaches a point of insatiable thirst and eventually collapse. Thank you, Jiang.
No, thank you. Okay, so like again, you make a great point. Like, let's be clear, let's be nuanced about all this. Okay, so you're absolutely right in that transnational capital. It's not a monolith. Again, it's a huge system, which includes Japanese pension funds, which includes family offices, which includes sovereign wealth funds of Norway. It's a huge pool. But the point I'm trying to make is like there's certain individuals in the system that always win out. And they're able to win out because they're able to coordinate together across borders secretly. And civil societies, eschatology allows them to coordinate, especially Zionism. Okay. Now, we need to differentiate between transnational capitalism and capitalism. There's a huge difference. Okay. So you're absolutely right in that throughout history, we've had capitalism before. This goes back thousands of years. You look at Babylonia, you look at the Roman Empire, where Jesus was, they had capitalism, right? And what they recognize is like once you reach a certain stage of capitalism, that destroys society because people become too greedy, they become too materialistic, there's too much debt, there's too much corruption, there's too much inequality. Okay. What's unique about our time is transnational capital. Okay. Capitalism and transnational capital are not the same thing. Capital is, okay, well, you're stuck where you are. So if your society collapses, you're completely screwed. Okay. So think of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. You have these families that have been in charge since the founding of the Roman Republic, and when the Roman Empire collapsed, basically the Visigoths came and conquered your territory. You're completely screwed because like where are you gonna go? You have like all this gold, but like you try transporting your gold anywhere else, they're gonna kill you. All right, there's nowhere else for you to go. What is unique about our time is the seamless, frictionless movement of capital from one area to the next. Okay, so you talk about Japan, the Meiji Restoration. Well, what allowed for the Meiji Restoration was all this capital investment from Europe, especially the British, right? So that's what's unique about our time. Yes, we've had capitalism before, but the idea